Yes, indeed, we are talking about a God of War game, and this is actually the latest one that came out less than a week ago. I know a few of you have been wanting me to look at this series for a long while now, but I think I can get away starting with this one because of how different it is and how loosely the plot for this game connects to the others.
I've been playing God of War games since the PS2 days. I remember my dad bringing the first one back from America, and I was just blown away by how awesomely stylish it looked. The first boss fight against the Hydra will always loop in my head whenever I think about this game. It was so damn cool battling something so huge and deadly and defeating it like it was nothing. Typically, God of War games are third-person hack and slashers where you tackle different gods, monsters, and legends from Greek mythology, such as Cyclops and Medusa, and of course the God of War Ares. In those games you play as Kratos, also known as the Ghost of Sparta, since the ashes of those he has killed are permanently attached to his skin, and he journeys to find the grand MacGuffin of that game needed to stop the main villain. As for the newest one, still made by Santa Monica, the title and new feel to the series may suggest that this is a reboot of some kind, but in truth it's a sequel to God of War 3, as evidenced by brief cameos from past characters, while also replaying the final battle from the third game. So you'd be okay calling this God of War 4. I don't know why Santa Monica didn't simply name it that. They claim that they had to reimagine everything for this game, hence the lack of numerals in the title, but if it's a sequel, couldn't they have come up with a different name? What also didn't help was knowing that Kratos would be tackling Norse mythology as opposed to Greek, so I still think we needed a clearer title to make it easier to understand. Anyway, this story takes place several years after God of War 3, showing us that Kratos is now living a new life in the Nordic lands and has a son named Atreus who accompanies him in his travels, leaving Olympus behind. Don't worry, I'm not going to spoil anything in this review, but the basic premise is that sometime off screen, Kratos married his second wife, Faye, before she died of some unexplained incident that never gets mentioned throughout the entire game. That's lovely. But before she passed away, she gave birth to Atreus, which explains why he's never made an appearance in the previous games, and Kratos tries to raise him to be a hunter so that he knows how to survive in conditions like these. And in case you're wondering, he does not know that Kratos is a god, despite seeing him do some impossible crap from time to time, but he just shrugs it off and simply thinks he's really strong. People that go to the gym every day would not be able to pull off what Kratos does, and this kid doesn't piece together that something's a bit off about his dad. You, sir, are a very dumb boy. I suppose his mind's probably focused on their mission, which is to scatter the ashes of his mother from the top of the highest mountain in the 9 realms. But it's of course not as easy as it possibly sounds, because everyone and everything wants to kill these two. Norse monsters, this immortal stranger you meet at the start, these two jackasses who block our path for no reason, and even their natural surroundings. I don't know why Kratos and Atreus have such rotten luck just getting to this mountain, and I'm surprised they didn't consider looking for a safer place to scatter the ashes, but I guess it's also to prove their determination and strength. That's all fine and dandy, and while I didn't get invested throughout all of the story, it serves its purpose okay. You've got a goal, the characters are established, start your adventure. The plot is serviceable, not amazing, but serviceable. It's definitely one of those stories that's more about the journey than the destination, and there's a huge emphasis on the father and son relationship between Kratos and Atreus, which again is perfectly fine. Atreus is looking to become a fighter and please his dad, while Kratos is just aiming to be a better parent. There are family dilemmas that you can see coming a million miles away, and they're cringingly cliche in all honesty, but these moments don't last for an unbearably long time. I expected worse when I saw that caring for your child was going to play a big part of God of War 4, and the kid's definitely more obedient than other video game children, but I can't say he's the best one either. Thankfully though, during gameplay, Atreus has got the same blessings as Ellie from The Last of Us. He can't die at all, and you can command him to use his bow and arrow at your targeted enemies, so you don't have to worry about looking after him and getting a game over just because you left him for a few seconds. Hacking and slashing is still one of God of War's main draws, but it plays a hell of a lot differently than what we're used to at this point. Your primary weapon throughout a huge chunk of the game is your axe, which has ice properties built into them, which is not only effective against enemies, but can also be exploited to solve puzzles and stop traps. When you throw the axe, you can instantly call it back by pressing the triangle button similar to Thor's hammer, and that can also be abused to potentially land another hit on enemies. The axe isn't as good for filling up the new stun gauge on foes, however, which is where your fists come in handy, but punches and kicks do a reasonable amount of damage as well, and if you manage to fill the stun meter all the way and press R3, Kratos can do a finishing move that depletes a large portion of their health. If you want to dish out more pain though, then that's where the returning rage meter comes in and beefs up your attack powers for a limited time, in addition to giving a little bit of health back while in this state. Kratos also has a shield at his disposal that he can use at any time to block and parry attacks, and it even has a few attacks of its own thanks to the new skill tree system. Yes, just like the rebooted Tomb Raider games, you gain experience for killing enemies and completing objectives so that you can spend them on all sorts of new moves and techniques to make fighting easier and more versatile for you. And if that wasn't enough, you can add 2 special attacks that you activate by holding L1 and one of the attack buttons, which you can also spend XP on to further enhance their power. However, I wouldn't really recommend doing that until you've bought the necessary skills first, since you come across new special attacks so frequently as you search, and I'll admit, it is a rather limiting change compared to having all of these abilities as we unlock them in the previous games. It's not a bad change by any means, but I don't have the same sense of freedom as I did before. Most of that comes in the form of crafted armor, because of course there had to be a crafting system too. That's also the only way to increase the strength of your weapons. Furthermore, some armor can have little perks fitted in to increase your stats, which you'll most likely find around the world more than the special attacks. Oh yeah, God of War has now become an open world game, and again I call back to the rebooted Tomb Raider games because progression is very similar to them. You have tons to do and collect to fill up your checklist, like side quests and little trinkets and treasure that you can sell to the blacksmiths, but aside from using your canoe to travel to different areas, the pathways are fairly linear. Platforming's still present as well, but it's not nearly as laid out as the other games, and it actually feels a little odd doing it this time. Firstly, you press the circle button to jump instead of X like it's always been up to this point. That's strange enough, but in order to jump to another gripping point or drop down or anything like that, you have to move the camera until you see the circle button appear on that particular point, where you can then move forward. You get used to doing this eventually, but it's still so weird platforming like this, and I'm not sure what was wrong with doing it traditionally. But it's not like it's a major factor anyway, because there isn't much exploring that can be done as you go through the story. Despite you finding a plethora of these mystic gateways to be used for fast travel, almost all of them are locked until you're near the end, which will probably turn off those that want to explore a little more. You can do a few side quests along your way and get some extra experience points, but otherwise you'll have to wait until you get more gear and the mystic gateways are unlocked before you do anything else. What doesn't help is the little bit of backtracking that's required to finish the game. There will be a number of times in the story that you need to go back through a previous area to advance, and this is where fast traveling really would have helped, but it rarely comes into play. And it's probably one of the main reasons God of War is way longer than its predecessors.
God of War games tend to usually be around 10 hours each, a pretty reasonable length, not too short but not too long for those kind of games. What's God of War 4's running time just for completing the story? 17 to 20 hours, and with all the side stuff done, reportedly it takes roughly 35 hours. What the hell?
Jesus, really? 35 hours? I mean, if collectathons and completing side quests are your thing, then fair play to you, but damn. I would seriously be taking my time to do all of that. I got kinda sick of using the axe after about 10 hours in or so. And I'm glad that the Blades of Chaos have made a return, and it's a really awesome moment when you get them, but that's not until 2/3 into the story. I get that Kratos was trying to hide these from Atreus, but man, couldn't I have gotten these a little earlier? Oh well, regardless, the Blades of Chaos are just as amazing as they have been, and it even has its own set of skills and special attacks that you can equip to make them even more badass. I rarely switched to the axe after I got these, only to solve more puzzles and kill enemies weak to frost. And I also think this is where the game really picks up in my opinion, both in story and gameplay. The axe is great and all, but the Blades of Chaos have a lot more coverage. It doesn't make God of War as punishing as it was beforehand. I died a surprising number of times in this game, probably more so than any God of War title I've played, and it starts kicking your teeth in from the very first boss. It's not impossibly hard or anything, but I was playing on the normal difficulty and I consider myself to be a fairly skilled gamer, not a pro by any means, but I was shocked to see how much trouble I was having with this game, especially with the optional areas. Whew, these really test your skills. You're put against some of the strongest enemies in the game and they often like to throw curveballs at you, so prepare to die a lot. I guarantee these were made so that you were encouraged to find the materials needed to craft some of the strongest gear in the game. Nasty move there, Santa Monica. Nasty move. Best to find yourself the secret chest as well to improve your health and rage meters. I will give God of War this over the Tomb Raider reboot. It has way better boss battles than I thought it would have. I don't think they're in any way the best in the series, but they could have been a lot worse, and I enjoyed fighting one or two of them. I don't like how often they're recycled though. That felt very cheap for Santa Monica standards, especially since God of War games are very well known for their numerous and amazing boss fights. This unfortunately goes for the final boss as well, who I thought was pretty underwhelming given there could have been much better options to pick from Norse mythology. I won't show who it is, but I was rather disappointed and it went on a tad too long for my liking.
But even though I have a few problems with God of War and I wouldn't say this is my favorite game in the series or give it a 10 out of 10 like most critics have given it, I can't deny that this is a perfectly polished game.
Yes, it is quite different to other God of War games, but for the most part, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Some aspects do feel like a traditional God of War game, and it's not too different to the point of feeling like something else entirely. The changes that were made are fine, the new cinematic style can be creative at times by doing everything in one shot, not to mention the graphics are unbelievably gorgeous, and you can choose between 4K resolution or 1080p 60 frames per second. I went with the 4K visuals personally, since I recently got a PS4 Pro and wanted to provide a challenge for it. Once I fully complete everything though, I don't think this is a game that can be replayed as easily as the other entries because of how cinematic it is. Some people may disagree, but I personally don't tend to replay games where bits and pieces of it basically involve walking slowly or there are scripted sequences I'm supposed to react quickly to, but that's just me. I of course won't judge anyone who likes these kind of games, and while it may be a little slow going, God of War is worth checking out. You can certainly start with this one too if you're new to the series, since there are so few callbacks to previous games and it takes on a completely different form of mythology. Give it a look and see what you think.
So there you have it, God of War gets a recommendation, and hopefully for those trying out the series, this may convince you to give the other games a shot. Well, I've got another game to do before we discuss Kingdom Hearts 2, but once again, I'm going to leave this as a surprise for you all. I feel this one's going to be pretty special. Hope you all look forward to it, and I'll see you later.